Don't you dare walk away from me when I am talking to you. You know your place.
She was the most feared biker queen in East Asia, Seraphine Moore, a woman known in the underworld as Sarah the Reaper, a legend whispered with equal parts terror and respect, and Kwon Tae-hyuk, Seoul's most ruthless mafia boss, a man who crushed anyone beneath him, who thought silence meant weakness, who believed the quiet black maid cleaning his mansion was nothing, just invisible help, just another servant to dismiss. He mocked her, belittled her, toyed with her like she was worthless. Then came the night-masked bikers saved his life, and when the leader removed her helmet, his entire world shattered. She wasn't his maid, she was his reckoning. Now he stands face to face with the woman he degraded for months, and she holds all the cards. He mistook composure for submission, and submission never forgets. Welcome back to Afro-Korean Dynasty Stories, besties. As always, I strive to give you the best viewing experience. Make sure you stay till the end. This story will set your soul on fire. The penthouse smelled like expensive leather and old money. Kwon Tae-hyuk sat behind his desk like a king on a throne, watching three men sweat across from him. They owed him money. A lot of money. And in his world, debts were paid in cash or blood. "You have until Friday," he said, voice cold as winter. "Don't make me come looking for you." The men bowed so low their foreheads nearly touched the marble floor. They scrambled out like scared animals, and Tae-hyuk smiled. Fear was respect. Fear was control. Fear was how you stayed on top. The door opened quietly. She entered carrying a silver tray with tea, eyes down, steps silent. Seraphine Moore, his maid for the past 2 months. Dark skin, simple black dress with white apron, that ridiculous maid headpiece covering her hair. She moved like a shadow, there but not really there. "Finally," he said without looking at her. "Took you long enough." "My apologies, sir." Her voice was soft, polite, completely empty. She set the tea down with perfect precision. Her hands were steady, professional. But if he'd been paying attention, really paying attention, he might have noticed the calluses on her palms, not the soft kind from scrubbing floors, the hard kind from gripping motorcycle handlebars and gunmetal. He didn't notice. "This better not be cold like yesterday," he said, taking a sip. "I don't pay you to serve me garbage." "Of course not, sir." Something flickered in her eyes for half a second, something sharp and dangerous. Then it was gone, hidden behind that calm, obedient mask. "You're dismissed," he said, waving her away like she was nothing. She bowed slightly and left without a sound. Tae-hyuk went back to his phone, already forgetting she existed. In his mind, she was just the help, invisible, unimportant, just another servant who knew her place. If only he knew. Hours later, deep in the night, Seraphine locked her small quarters at the back of the penthouse. The room was plain, simple, exactly what a maid's room should look like. But she moved to the closet, pushed aside her uniforms, and pulled out a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it sat tactical gear, encrypted phones, and weapons that would make most people's blood run cold. She pulled out one of the phones and dialed. Someone answered immediately. "Status?" A man's voice, speaking English with a thick accent. "Phase 2 complete," Seraphine said, her voice completely different now, strong, commanding, nothing like the quiet maid who'd served tea hours ago. "He suspects nothing. I've accessed his private meetings for 3 weeks now. Every conversation, every deal, every contact. He talks like I'm not even in the room. And the leak? Any closer to finding who's sabotaging our network? Getting warmer. It's someone in Seoul's inner circle, someone who has access to both Korean and international routes. I'll have a name soon." She paused, her jaw tight. "He called me adequately trained today. Like I'm some dog he's teaching tricks." The man on the other end laughed. "The great Sarah the Reaper playing Maid. Your crew would lose their minds if they saw you now." "They'd lose their minds if they heard how he talks to me," she said, something cold creeping into her voice. "But that's fine. Let him think I'm nothing. Makes this easier. The more invisible I am, the more he reveals. Just don't blow your cover because he hurt your feelings. My feelings are fine, Seraphine said flatly. But when this is over, Kwon Tae-hyuk is going to learn a very important lesson about underestimating people. What lesson? She smiled in the darkness, and it wasn't kind. That the help is always watching, always listening, and sometimes the help bites back. She ended the call and put everything back in its hiding place. Then she changed into her night clothes, lay down in her small bed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd put the uniform back on. And tomorrow she'd serve his tea and take his insults and pretend to be nothing. But not forever. Soon, very soon, Kwon Tae-hyuk would see her face under very different circumstances, and when he did, she wanted to remember every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment he made her feel small. Because payback, she thought, as sleep finally came, was going to be so sweet. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations took months and single meals cost more than most people's rent. Tae-hyuk sat at the head of a private table, 5 of his top men around him, discussing territory and money and power. Seraphine moved between them like a ghost, refilling drinks, clearing plates, completely invisible. The restaurant owner owed Tae-hyuk favors, so when he'd requested his own server for the night, they'd sent her without question. "The docks are secure," one man said. "No problems this month." "Good. Keep it that way?" Tae-hyuk barely glanced at Seraphine as she poured his wine. "I don't tolerate mistakes." She nodded silently and stepped back into the shadows. Her eyes tracked every face at the table, memorizing names, positions, details. One of these men was dirty. She could feel it. Someone here was the leak. The meeting ended near midnight. Tae-hyuk stood, straightening his expensive suit, and headed for the exit. 2 of his bodyguards flanked him as they walked into the parking garage. That's when everything exploded. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. His bodyguards went down instantly, blood spreading across concrete. Tae-hyuk dove behind a car, pulling his own weapon, but there were too many. 6? Maybe 7 shooters, all armed, all advancing. "Traitor!" he shouted at someone in the shadows. "You'll die for this." "You first, boss," came a familiar voice, one of his own men, one from the dinner table. Tae-hyuk fired back, but a bullet caught his shoulder. He gasped, stumbling. Another shot grazed his leg. He was cornered, bleeding, outnumbered. This was it. This was how he died, betrayed by his own people in a parking garage like some common criminal. The shooters closed in, weapons raised. Then the roar of engines shattered the night. Motorcycles poured into the garage like mechanical thunder. 6 bikes, riders dressed head to toe in black leather and dark helmets. They moved with military precision, not random chaos. Controlled, deadly, professional. The shooters turned to face this new threat, but it was already too late. The bikers didn't waste time talking. They struck like lightning. One rider swept past and kicked a shooter in the chest, sending him flying into a concrete pillar. Another biker drove straight at 2 men, forcing them to scatter, then circled back and disarmed them with moves that looked like martial arts mixed with pure violence. Tae-hyuk watched in stunned silence as his would-be killers were destroyed in under 2 minutes. The bikers didn't kill them, but they didn't need to. Broken bones, shattered weapons, and pure terror did the job. When the last shooter collapsed unconscious, the garage fell silent except for idling engines. The lead biker sat perfectly still on a matte black Ducati, engine purring like a satisfied predator. Slowly, deliberately, gloved hands reached up and gripped the helmet. Time seemed to slow down as the helmet lifted. Dark skin, high cheekbones, eyes that burned with intelligence and power, hair pulled back tight, no longer hidden under a maid's headpiece. Seraphine Moore looked down at him with an expression that made his blood run cold. Not his maid, not the quiet, obedient woman who'd served his tea hours ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. Someone who commanded respect with just her presence. "You," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're Sarah the Reaper," she said calmly. like she was introducing herself at a business meeting. Her crew sat silent on their bikes behind her, a wall of loyalty and power. "I believe you've been calling me the help for 2 months now." Taehyuk tried to stand, but his wounded leg gave out. He slumped against the car, bleeding, helpless, completely at her mercy. She kicked down her stand and dismounted with fluid grace. Every movement screamed training, confidence, deadly capability. She walked toward him slowly, boots echoing in the quiet garage. "Why?" he managed. "Why save me?" "Because you're more useful alive," she said, crouching down to his eye level. "For now." She reached out and gripped his chin, forcing him to look directly at her. Her hand was strong, calloused, nothing like the gentle servant who'd poured his wine. "Consider your life alone, Mr. Kwan," she said softly, dangerously. "I just became your creditor, and trust me, I will collect payment soon." She released him and stood, towering over his broken form. "Tell your doctors you were saved by angels," she said, turning back to her bike, "because devils don't save people. They just delay the reckoning." She pulled her helmet back on, mounted her Ducati, and revved the engine once. The sound vibrated through his bones like a warning. Then she was gone, her crew following like a dark wave, leaving him bleeding on cold concrete with his entire world shattered around him. The quiet maid was a queen, and he'd spent 2 months treating her like garbage. Taehyuk closed his eyes, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt something he'd forgotten existed. Fear. Taehyuk spent 3 days in his private doctor's office getting patched up, bullet removed from his shoulder, leg stitched, painkillers that barely touched the real hurt, his shattered pride. The moment he could walk, he started digging. "Find me everything on Seraphine Moore," he told his tech guy, an unnervous man named Minjun who could hack anything. "Everything. Now." What Minjun found made Taehyuk's blood turn to ice. She's Sarah the Reaper," Minjun said, his face pale as he scrolled through files on 3 different monitors. "Oh God, boss, she's the Sarah the Reaper." Taehyuk grabbed the edge of the desk. "Explain." "She runs the largest independent biker network in East Asia, maybe the world. They're not just bikers. They're organized, connected, feared. She's got people in 12 countries. She moves anything across any border without anyone stopping her. Drugs, weapons, information, people who need to disappear. If you need something moved that governments don't want moved, you call her." The screen showed grainy photos. Seraphine on a motorcycle in Tokyo. Seraphine meeting with Thai crime lords. In Seraphine standing over what looked like a rival gang leader, gun in hand. "They say she's killed 17 men personally," Minjun continued, voice shaking. "They say entire organizations have fallen because they crossed her. They say—" "Stop!" Taehyuk's voice came out strangled. He saw her face in every photo, not the quiet maid, the warrior, the queen, the woman who'd served his tea while probably planning his destruction. His mind flashed back, her first day, when she'd interviewed for the position. He'd barely looked at her resume. "You'll do," he'd said dismissively. "Keep the house clean and stay out of my way." She'd bowed her head. "Yes, sir." Now he understood. She'd wanted in. She'd chosen this, chosen to be invisible in his house, in his life, while he talked and planned and revealed everything. Another memory. 2 weeks ago, he'd spilled coffee on important documents. She'd been standing right there. "Clean this up," he'd snapped, "and try not to be so useless next time." "My apologies, sir," she'd said softly. He remembered the way her jaw had tightened for just a second. Not fear, not shame, anger. Pure, controlled anger that she'd hidden so perfectly he'd never noticed. Every meeting, every phone call, every conversation with his men about deals and territory and weaknesses. She'd been there, always there, pouring tea, clearing plates, standing in corners like furniture, listening, learning, gathering intelligence like a spy in his own home. "How long has she been operating?" he asked. Minjun checked his files. 7 years. She took over her father's crew when she was 23 after he was killed, built it into an empire. No one knows how she moves so freely. She has connections everywhere. Police, politicians, military. She's untouchable. Untouchable. The word echoed in Tae-hyuk's head. He'd called her adequately trained. He'd snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog. He'd treated the most dangerous woman in East Asia like she was nothing. Rage burned in his chest, mixing with something else, something that felt uncomfortably like fear. And underneath that, even more uncomfortable fascination. She'd played him perfectly, completely. He'd never suspected, not once. "Find out what she wants," he said. "Why she was in my house. What she's planning." Min-jun typed frantically, but after an hour he looked up, sweating. "Boss, I can't find anything. Her network is locked down tight, but—" He paused, looking terrified. "But what?" "Someone's been watching our investigation. Someone very good. They know we're looking." A chill ran down Tae-hyuk's spine. She knew. Of course she knew. She probably knew the moment he'd started searching. She'd probably expected it. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered it with shaking hands he hated himself for having. Silence. Then her voice, calm and cold. Not the soft servant voice. The real one. "Found what you were looking for, Mr. Kwan? What do you want?" His voice came out harder than he felt. "A conversation. Tomorrow. Your mansion. Noon. Come alone, or don't come at all." She paused. "And Tae-hyuk? Don't bother running. I know where you are every second of every day. I've known for 2 months. Running just makes this harder." The line went dead. Tae-hyuk sat in silence, phone still pressed to his ear. Oh, his mansion, the place she'd cleaned and served, and pretended to be nothing. She was coming back, not as the maid, as herself. Min-jun looked at him nervously. "Boss? What do we do?" Tae-hyuk thought about the way she'd moved in that parking garage, thought about her reputation, thought about the fact that she'd saved his life when she could have let him die. "We do exactly what she says," he said quietly, "because the alternative is worse." She arrived exactly at noon, and everything about her entrance was a message. No maid uniform, no downcast eyes, no pretending. Seraphine Moore walked through his front door in black leather pants that looked painted on, heavy boots that echoed on his marble floors, and a jacket that screamed danger and money. Her hair was free, falling in natural curls over her shoulders. Dark sunglasses hid her eyes until she pulled them off and tucked them into her pocket. She looked around his penthouse like she owned it. Maybe she did. She'd lived here for 2 months after all, just not the way he'd thought. Tae-hyuk stood by the window, trying to look calm even though his heart hammered against his ribs. His shoulder still ached from the bullet. His pride hurt worse. "Nice place," she said casually, running her hand along his expensive couch. "I never got to really appreciate it before, too busy scrubbing your floors." "Get to the point." His voice came out sharp, angry. Good. Anger was better than fear. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "The point is simple, Mr. Kwan. Someone in Seoul's criminal network has been sabotaging my operations for 6 months, stealing my shipments, killing my people, feeding information to my enemies." She walked toward him slowly, predator approaching prey. "I needed inside access to Seoul's elite underworld. Your mansion provided the perfect cover. So you played Maid." The words tasted bitter. "You made a fool of me." "No," she said, stopping 3 feet away. "You made a fool of yourself. I just let you." His hand clenched into a fist. Everything in him wanted to lash out, to hurt her the way she'd hurt him, but he'd seen what she could do, seen her crew destroy 7 armed men in minutes. "Every meeting I served tea at," she continued, voice cold as winter. "Every phone call you took while I cleaned, every conversation you had like I wasn't even human. I heard everything, learned everything, your contacts, your weaknesses, your secrets." Tae-hyuk felt sick. If you're here to kill me." "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead." She tilted her head, studying him like he was an interesting insect. "I'm here to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" You help me find the traitor. Use your connections, your resources, your knowledge of Seoul's underworld. In exchange, I don't destroy you for the way you treated me for 2 months." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm offering you a choice," she corrected. "Work with me and maybe you survive this with your empire intact. Refuse, and I make sure everyone in Seoul knows that Kwon Tae-hyuk, the big scary mafia boss, spent 2 months ordering around Sarah the Reaper like she was his servant. How long do you think your reputation lasts after that?" His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. She had him, completely, totally, and they both knew it. "You used me," he said, voice low and dangerous. "You used people your whole life," she shot back. "Called it business, called it power. The only difference is I'm better at it than you." They stared at each other, tension thick enough to choke on. Tae-hyuk hated her in that moment, hated how she'd fooled him, hated how she stood there so confident, so powerful, so absolutely in control. But underneath the hate, something else stirred, something he didn't want to name. Respect, maybe, or fascination, or something far more dangerous. "Why did you save my life in that parking garage?" he asked quietly. For the first time, something flickered across her face, something almost vulnerable. "Because dead men can't be useful, and I need you useful." It wasn't the whole truth, he could tell, but he didn't push. "Your cruelty made it easier," she added, voice harder now. "Every insult, every dismissive comment, made it simple to remember you were just a target, just a means to an end." Another lie. He saw it in the way her fingers tightened slightly. It had bothered her. Maybe more than she wanted to admit. "Fine," he said. "I'll help you find your traitor. But after this is done, we're even. You leave my life and never come back. Deal." She stepped forward and held out her hand. He stared at it for a long moment. This felt like more than a business arrangement. This felt like signing a contract in blood with the devil herself. But what choice did he have? He took her hand. Her grip was strong, calloused, everything the maid's hands had hidden. The contact sent electricity up his arm that he absolutely refused to acknowledge. "You don't make me regret letting you live," she said softly. "Don't make me regret agreeing to this," he countered. They held the handshake a second too long, both realized it at the same time, and pulled away like they'd been burned. "We start tomorrow," she said, heading for the door. "And Tae-hyuk? Next time you hire a maid, maybe try treating her like a human being. You never know who you're really talking to." She left, boots echoing on marble, taking all the air in the room with her. Tae-hyuk stood alone in his penthouse, hands still tingling from her touch, and wondered what he'd just agreed to. Nothing good, that was certain. Nothing good at all. Working with Seraphine was like trying to mix oil and water. They fought about everything. "We need to approach this strategically," Tae-hyuk said, spreading files across his desk. "Set up meetings with key players. Apply pressure through proper channels. Make them think we're allies before we strike." Seraphine leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That takes too long. I know a guy who knows a guy. We grab him, ask questions, get answers tonight. That's reckless. That's efficient." They glared at each other across the study. This was day 3 of their partnership, and they'd barely made progress because they couldn't agree on anything. His world was boardrooms and expensive dinners, political games where violence happened behind closed doors with lawyers and contracts. He moved like a chess player, thinking 5 steps ahead, never revealing his hand. Her world was street corners and garage meetings, direct action where loyalty mattered more than paperwork. She moved like a fighter, fast and brutal, untrusting instinct over plans. "Your way gets people talking," he said. "Word spreads. The traitor goes underground." "Your way lets them prepare," she countered. "By the time you're done with meetings, the trail's cold." But slowly, painfully, they started to learn. He watched her work her network, making calls in 3 different languages, getting information in hours that would have taken him days. She had contacts everywhere, docks, airports, police stations. People trusted her in ways his fear-based empire never achieved. She watched him manipulate a business rival into revealing connections without the man even realizing he'd said anything useful. His mind was sharp, strategic, seeing patterns she'd missed. "You're better at the long game than I thought," she admitted one evening. "You're better at reading people than I expected," he said grudgingly. The breakthrough came on day 7. They'd identified a low-level player who might know something, a man named Chen who moved cargo through Busan port. "I'll set up a meeting," Tae-hyuk said. "Convince him to talk." Or, Seraphine suggested, "We do both. You set the meeting. I provide motivation." They worked it perfectly. Tae-hyuk arranged dinner at a waterfront restaurant, all smiles and business talk. Chen relaxed, thinking this was just networking. Then Seraphine walked in, not as maid or biker queen, but as a businesswoman in a sharp suit that somehow made her more intimidating. Chen's face went white. "Sarah the Reaper," he whispered. "Hello, Chen," she said pleasantly, sitting down. "Mr. Kwan and I have some questions. You're going to answer them." The combination was devastating. Tae-hyuk's strategic pressure and her reputation broke Chen in 20 minutes. He spilled everything, names, routes, connections to the sabotage. Afterward, standing in the parking lot as Chen drove away terrified, Tae-hyuk and Seraphine looked at each other. "That actually worked," he said. "We're not completely useless together," she agreed. Something passed between them in that moment. Not friendship, not yet, but recognition. Respect. The adrenaline of success mixed with something warmer, more dangerous. Their eyes held a second too long. Both looked away quickly. "We should review what he told us," Tae-hyuk said, voice rougher than normal. "Yeah. Your place?" They ended up in his study past midnight, files scattered everywhere, coffee growing cold. The investigation was narrowing. The traitor was someone high up, connected to both Korean and international networks, someone who could move freely in both their worlds. Seraphine sat on his couch, jacket off, looking more human than he'd ever seen her. Tired, real, not the terrifying biker queen or the invisible maid, just a woman working late on something that mattered. "We're close," she said, studying a file. "Maybe 2 more leads and we'll have a name." "Agreed." Silence fell, comfortable in a way that surprised them both. Then she looked up at him, and her expression was different. Vulnerable. Open in a way that made his chest tight. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why were you so cruel to me?" Her voice was quiet, genuine. "Those 2 months, the way you talked to me, treated me like I was nothing. Why?" Tae-hyuk opened his mouth, then closed it. He wanted to say it was just business, that he treated all servants that way, that it meant nothing. But sitting here, seeing her as a person instead of a symbol, those excuses tasted like ash. "I don't know," he said finally, honestly. "I've treated people like that my whole life, thought it made me powerful, thought it proved I was in control." He met her eyes. "I never thought about what it felt like from the other side." "It felt dehumanizing," she said softly. "Every day, every dismissive word, like I didn't matter, like I was just furniture in your world." The words hit harder than any punch. He saw himself through her eyes and hated what he saw. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out awkward, unfamiliar. He couldn't remember the last time he'd apologized to anyone. Seraphine studied him for a long moment. "That's the first honest thing you've said to me since we met. Does it help?" "A little." She stood, grabbing her jacket. "I should go. Early meeting with my crew tomorrow." She headed for the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth," she said. "You're not as terrible as I thought you were. You're learning. That counts for something." Then she was gone, leaving him alone with files and coffee and the uncomfortable realization that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see her as more than an enemy, and that terrified him more than anything. The breakthrough came 3 days later in the most unexpected way, over takeout food in his kitchen at 2 a.m. They'd been working for 16 hours straight, chasing leads, making calls, piecing together fragments of information. Seraphine sat on his counter, shoes off, eating noodles straight from the container. Taehyuk leaned against the opposite wall, too tired to care about proper dining etiquette. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. She looked up, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "Depends on the question. Why do you do this? Build an empire in the shadows. Risk your life every day. You could have gone legitimate years ago with your skills." Seraphine was quiet for a long moment, staring at her food. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Because people like me, black, foreign, women, we're invisible in this world. Or we're only seen as threats or servants or things to use. Never as equals. Never as people who matter." She set down her container. "My network protects people the system doesn't care about. Immigrants who can't get legal help, women running from dangerous situations, people society throws away. We're all invisible together, but we see each other, we protect each other." The honesty in her words hit him like a punch. He saw her differently now, not a criminal building power for power's sake, a protector who'd been forced to operate outside the law because the law never protected people like her. "That's why you were so angry," he said. "When I treated you like nothing. It wasn't just about the mission. It was personal." "Every single day," she admitted, "but I couldn't let you see that, couldn't let the mask slip." "We all wear masks," Taehyuk said, surprised by his own honesty. "Mine just looks different." She tilted her head, studying him. "What are you hiding behind yours?" He laughed, but it was bitter. "Fear, mostly. That if I show weakness, if I trust anyone, they'll use it to destroy me. My father taught me that. Trust no one, love nothing, control everything or be controlled." "Sounds lonely." "It is." The admission came out before he could stop it. "So lonely I forgot what anything else felt like, until you showed up and broke every rule I lived by." Something shifted in her expression. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. "We're more alike than I wanted to admit," she said softly. "Yeah, we are." Their eyes held across the kitchen. The air felt charged, heavy with things neither of them wanted to name. Seraphine's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She checked it and her whole body went rigid. "What is it?" "New information from my crew. They tracked financial movements. The traitor is someone in your inner circle. Someone with direct access to your operations and connections to international networks." She looked up, face grim. "Someone you trust completely." The words landed like ice water. Taehyuk's mind raced through names, faces, people he'd worked with for years. The betrayal cut deep, validating every fear he'd ever had about trust. "Who?" His voice came out rough. "We don't have a name yet, but we're close. We set up a sting operation. We can draw them out." They spent the next hour planning, falling back into the rhythm they'd developed. His strategic mind mapping out the trap, her tactical expertise filling in the details. They worked together like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Around 4 a.m, exhaustion finally caught up. Seraphine rubbed her eyes. And Taehyuk realized how close they'd gotten while leaning over the plans. Close enough to feel her warmth. Close enough to see the tiny scar on her cheekbone he'd never noticed before. "This could work," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "It has to work." He was looking at her lips without meaning to. She noticed. Her breath hitched slightly. Neither of them moved, but the space between them felt electric, dangerous, inevitable. He started to lean in. She tilted her face up, just a fraction, just enough. His phone exploded with noise. Emergency ringtone. They jerked apart like they'd been burned. Taehyuk grabbed it with shaking hands. "What?" Minjun's panicked voice. "Boss, we have a problem. Someone just tried to access your secure files. I traced it back, but they covered their tracks. Whoever this is, they know we're looking for them. Lock everything down. I'll be there in an hour." He hung up and found Seraphine already putting her shoes back on, walls slamming back into place. "They're getting nervous," she said, voice professional again. Good. Nervous people make mistakes. Seraphine, we should move up the timeline. Tomorrow night for the sting. Can you arrange it? Yes, but... Then we're set. She grabbed her jacket, not meeting his eyes. I'll contact my crew. We'll be ready. She headed for the door, moving fast like she was running from something. At the threshold, she paused. After this is over, she said quietly, still not looking at him, we need to talk about what this is. What is? This. Us. Whatever's happening between us that almost happened 5 minutes ago. Then she was gone, in leaving him standing in his kitchen with cold takeout and the ghost of what might have been. Tae-hyuk touched his lips and wondered when everything had gotten so complicated. The abandoned industrial complex sat on the edge of Seoul like a forgotten graveyard, rusted machinery, broken windows, perfect place for the kind of meeting that never made it into official records. Tae-hyuk stood in the center of the main warehouse, phone to his ear, playing his part perfectly. Yes, I have the information you wanted. Come alone and we'll make the exchange. 50 feet away, hidden behind old shipping containers, Seraphine and her crew waited in silence. 3 of her best people, armed and ready. Tae-hyuk's men covered the other exits. The trap was set. Beautiful. Foolproof. The traitor would walk in, try to buy the fake information. Dan, they'd have him. Headlights cut through the darkness. A black sedan pulled up. The door opened. Tae-hyuk's blood ran cold. Park Jin-woo stepped out. His oldest lieutenant. The man who'd been with him for 8 years. The man he'd trusted more than anyone. Jin-woo, Tae-hyuk said, voice hollow. Sorry, boss. Jin-woo didn't look sorry at all. He looked smug. Nothing personal, just business. Why? Because you're small time, local. I wanted international reach, real power. Jin-woo smiled. So I made a deal with people who could give it to me. That's when Tae-hyuk heard it. More engines. Too many engines. Vehicles poured in from every direction. Motorcycles, vans, trucks. Not his people. Not Seraphine's people. Someone else's. Now! Seraphine's voice cut through the night, but it was already too late. Gunfire erupted from a dozen positions. The industrial complex transformed into a war zone. Tae-hyuk dove behind a concrete pillar as bullets shredded the air where he'd been standing. It's a setup, someone shouted. Fall back. Chaos exploded. Seraphine's crew returned fire from their positions. Tae-hyuk's men tried to regroup, but the attackers had them surrounded, outnumbered, outgunned. Through the smoke and noise, Tae-hyuk saw Jin-woo climbing back into his sedan, laughing. The dragons send their regards, Jin-woo shouted. They're taking over both your territories, Sarah's network, your operations, all of it. You made it so easy working together. 2 empires for the price of 1. The Dragons, a rival biker syndicate from Hong Kong that had been trying to push into East Asia for years. Jin-woo hadn't just betrayed Tae-hyuk. He'd sold them both out. The sedan sped away, leaving them to die. Sarah! One of her crew members shouted. East exit is blocked. We're pinned. Tae-hyuk caught a glimpse of her across the warehouse, firing from behind a forklift, face set in grim determination. She was outnumbered on her side, too. A bullet grazed his arm. He fired back, took down one attacker, but more kept coming. His men were falling, blood spreading across concrete. The exit behind him was clear. He could run, save himself. Then he heard it. Boss is hit! Seraphine's crew member screaming. We need backup! East side now! Tae-hyuk looked at the exit, at freedom, at survival. Then he thought about Seraphine, about late nights planning together, about her honesty, about the almost kiss that had terrified him because it meant something real. I won't leave you like I've left everyone else, he whispered to himself. He turned and ran toward the gunfire. On the east side, Seraphine pressed her hand against her side where a bullet had caught her. Not deep, not fatal, but bleeding. Her crew was down to 2 people, surrounded by at least 8 dragons. She could retreat through a gap in their formation, could escape through the back window, could live to fight another day. But Tae-hyuk was on the west side. She'd heard his man scream that he was wounded. If she left, he'd die. You're mine now, she'd said in that parking garage. No one takes what's mine. She'd meant it. Fall back, she ordered her crew. Get out while you can. Boss, what about you? I said go. They hesitated, then ran. Smart, loyal, but they'd die if they stayed. Seraphine stayed. She fired, moved. Juan fired again, taking down attackers one by one. But there were too many. A bullet hit her leg. She stumbled, went down behind a metal support beam. Across the warehouse, through smoke and chaos, she saw him. Tae-hyuk, wounded and bleeding, fighting his way toward her instead of away. Idiot. Beautiful, stupid idiot. Their eyes met across impossible distance. The dragons closed in from all sides, both of them trapped, both of them bleeding, both of them surrounded with nowhere left to run. Tae-hyuk reached out his hand across the warehouse floor, even though she was 50 feet away, even though it was pointless. Seraphine reached back. Their fingers stretched toward each other across blood and bullets and everything that should have kept them apart. I'm sorry, he mouthed. Me too, she mouthed back. The dragons raised their weapons. And the world exploded into gunfire. The gunfire never came. Instead, a sound like rolling thunder. More motorcycles, but different. Seraphine's crew, not the 3 who'd been here, but dozens. Her full network descending like avenging angels. They poured in through every entrance, a coordinated strike that hit the dragons from behind. But the dragons weren't finished. They regrouped, turned their weapons on the new threat. Tae-hyuk saw one of them aim directly at Seraphine, who was struggling to stand with her wounded leg. He didn't think, just moved, threw himself across the space between them. The bullet meant for her chest caught his shoulder instead. He went down hard, pain exploding through his body. No! Seraphine's scream cut through the chaos. She crawled to him, pressed her hand against the wound, blood everywhere. Too much blood. Why did you do that? Her voice broke. You idiot, why? Told you, he gasped. Won't leave you, not like everyone else. Something changed in her eyes, something fierce and terrible and beautiful. She stood up despite her injured leg, despite the blood loss, despite everything. And Sarah the Reaper emerged in full force. She moved like death itself, every shot perfect, every movement calculated. The pain didn't slow her. The injuries didn't matter. She fought with the fury of someone protecting the one thing she couldn't afford to lose. A dragon rushed her. She disarmed him with her bare hands and used his own weapon against his partner. Another came from behind. She spun, caught him with an elbow to the throat, took him down without wasting a bullet. Her crew saw their boss transformed and fought harder. Tae-hyuk's remaining men, inspired by their boss taking a bullet for someone else, joined the fight with renewed purpose. The tide turned. The combined forces were devastating. Dragons fell one by one. Some tried to run. None made it far. When silence finally fell, the warehouse looked like a battlefield. Bodies everywhere. Smoke hanging in the air like fog. Victory, but at a cost. Seraphine limped back to Tae-hyuk, who'd somehow managed to sit up against the wall. They were both bleeding, both exhausted, both alive. She collapsed beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Just breathed, just existed in the aftermath. I'm sorry, Tae-hyuk said finally. His voice was rough with pain and emotion. For everything. Every cruel word. Every time I made you feel less than human. Every dismissive gesture. And every moment I treated you like you were nothing. He turned to look at her. You were never nothing. You were everything, and I was too blind and arrogant to see it. Tears ran down Seraphine's face, cutting clean paths through the dirt and blood. I stayed longer than the mission required, she admitted. Found the leak 3 weeks ago. Could have left. Should have left. But I stayed because... She swallowed hard. Because somewhere between the cruelty and the lies and the pretending, I started caring about you. The real you. Not the boss. Not the role. You. Seraphine, I wanted to hate you. Wanted revenge for every insult. But then I saw the loneliness. Saw someone as trapped by power as I was. Saw someone who could change if given a reason. She met his eyes. You became my reason. Taehyuk reached up with his good arm and cupped her face. You saved me long before tonight. Showed me what I'd become, what I could be instead. You took a bullet for me. I'd take 100 more. They leaned together slowly, carefully, mindful of wounds and pain. When their lips finally met, it tasted like blood and smoke and truth, desperate and gentle and perfect in its imperfection. The kiss deepened. Months of tension, weeks of working together, days of almost moments all poured into this one connection. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, they stared at each other in wonder. I love you, Taehyuk said. I love you, Seraphine said at the exact same moment. They stared, then started laughing, laughing through tears and pain and exhaustion, laughing because it was absurd, because it was perfect, because they'd almost died and instead found exactly what they'd been missing their entire lives. We're completely insane, Seraphine said, resting her forehead against his. Completely, he agreed, but I wouldn't change a single moment. Not even when I made you look like a fool? Especially not that. Best thing that ever happened to me. Sirens wailed in the distance. Her crew and his men were securing the area, dealing with the aftermath. But in their small corner of the wreckage, Taehyuk and Seraphine just held each other. Two broken people who'd found something whole. Two empires that had collided and created something stronger. Two hearts that had finally stopped hiding. What happens now? She asked. Now, he said, kissing her forehead. We build something new, together. No more cruelty. No more masks. Just us. Just this. Just us, she repeated, and it sounded like a promise. Like a beginning instead of an ending. Like exactly what they'd both been searching for without knowing it existed. The private hospital room was nicer than most apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows, comfortable chairs, equipment that beeped softly, monitoring Taehyuk's recovery. Seraphine sat in the chair beside his bed, laptop balanced on her knees, running her network while refusing to leave his side. Her own injuries were bandaged, but healing. The doctors had tried to put her in a separate room. She'd refused with a look that made them stop arguing. You should rest, Taehyuk said, watching her work. I am resting. I'm sitting down. You know what I mean? She looked up and smiled. That real smile he was still getting used to. Not the maid's polite expression. Not the reaper's cold smirk. Just Seraphine, genuine and beautiful. I'm not leaving you, she said simply. Get used to it. He reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation. We should talk about what comes next, he said, after we heal, after the dust settles. I've been thinking about that. She closed her laptop. What if we merged operations? Your soul connections, my international network, we'd be unstoppable. Your crew would never trust me. Then you'll earn their trust, like you're earning mine every day. My organization thinks I've lost my mind. Then we'll show them you've found something better. It wasn't easy. Nothing worth having ever was. His people resisted at first. A partnership with an outsider? With someone who'd infiltrated their boss's home? With a woman? A black woman, a foreigner. But Seraphine won them over one meeting at a time. Her strategic mind, her network's reach, her ability to solve problems they'd struggled with for years. Slowly, grudgingly, they started to respect her, then trust her, then follow her lead as naturally as they followed Taehyuk's. Her crew was suspicious too, their boss falling for a Korean Mafia kingpin who'd treated her terribly. It looked like betrayal, like she'd forgotten who she was. But Taehyuk proved himself through action, not words. He listened when her people spoke, treated them with respect, learned their names, their stories, what mattered to them. He attended community meetings in the neighborhoods her network protected, put his money and influence behind causes that helped people who looked like Seraphine. He didn't just change his behavior toward her, he changed completely. 6 months after the warehouse, they stood backstage at a press conference that would reshape Seoul's underworld forever. Official announcement of their partnership, legitimate business fronts combining, public faces for empires that operated in shadows. Seraphine adjusted her blazer, nervous in a way she rarely showed. Taehyuk stepped behind her, helped settle the jacket on her shoulders. His hands lingered there, steady and warm. "You look perfect," he said. She turned and straightened his tie, even though it was already perfect. "So do you." "Scared?" he asked. "Terrified. You?" "Completely. But we're doing this together." She kissed him softly. "Together." They walked out hand in hand. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Seoul's elite watched with mixed expressions: shock, curiosity, grudging respect. Taehyuk and Seraphine stood at the podium as equals, no master and servant, no boss and employee, partners in every sense that mattered. The announcement went smoothly. Their combined empire was now the most powerful force in East Asia's underworld, legitimate enough to operate openly, connected enough to protect what needed protecting, strong enough that no one dared challenge them. After the press conference, they escaped to the penthouse rooftop, the same building where she'd once scrubbed his floors and served his tea. Now she owned half of it. Seoul spread out below them, lights twinkling like stars brought down to earth. Their city, their kingdom. "No regrets?" Seraphine asked, leaning against the railing. Then Taehyuk wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her close. "Only that I didn't see you from the beginning, that I wasted months being blind." "You see me now?" She turned in his arms to face him. "That's what matters." "I see everything. How strong you are, how brilliant, how beautiful, how you've made me into someone I actually like being." "We made each other better," she corrected. "That's what love does." He kissed her as the city lights blazed around them. Two people who'd started as master and servant became enemies, then allies, then lovers. They'd built an empire on respect, equality, and the kind of love that only survives fire. The maid who was never really a maid. The boss who learned that true power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Seraphine Moore and Kwon Tae-hyuk. Sarah the Reaper and Seoul's reformed kingpin. Two thrones, one empire, one love that had burned through every obstacle and emerged stronger. This was their kingdom now, together, and they ruled it not with fear, but with the fierce partnership of two people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen each other anyway. Seoul had never seen anything like them. The city would never be the same, neither would they. And that was exactly how it should be.